Good morning. I thought I'd just start off with a little bit about myself. I see a lot of familiar faces, but there are also some unfamiliar faces, and folks may not know a little bit about me. But I've been with the regional board for almost 30 years. It's hard to believe that, but it's coming on 30 years. And I think 25 of those 30 years have been spent doing basin planning and working on TMDLs. And I originally worked on this TMDL. I oversaw the staff person who wrote the TMDL, and that was 15 years ago. And so I'm very familiar with this watershed. I know a lot of the stakeholders. I know a lot of the issues. And it's really good to come back and kind of see where we are with the implementation of this TMDL. So what I thought I'd do is just spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit about what the regional board's function is, our involvement in the TMDL, and some of the where we see the TMDL going. Okay, so the Santa Ana Regional Water Board is one of the 9 regional water boards in the state of California. Our parent organization is the State Water Resources Control Board, located in Sacramento. We are actually the smallest regional board in the state, but we do have the title of having one of the greatest population densities. So the urban landscape really affects water quality in our region. In addition, in this particular San Jacinto watershed, as Mark discussed, we have historic and current agricultural activities that also really do affect water quality, not only in the region as a whole, but also in Canyon Lake and Lake Elsinore. So you've heard a little discussion about TMDLs, and what you might be asking yourself, where did those TMDLs come from? Well, it really starts with our fundamental document, our water quality control plan, our basin plan, that specifies and provides information on the water quality in our region. So the basin plan lists all of the water bodies in our region. We designate beneficial uses for those water bodies, such as recreation, aquatic life, habitat, fisheries, swimming, those kind of beneficial uses. The basin plan also specifies numeric and narrative water quality objectives for various chemical pollutants that are really intended to ensure that those beneficial uses are protected. So for the case of Canyon Lake and Lake Elsinore, the basin plan specifies nutrient water quality objectives, and those nutrient water quality objectives are intended to ensure that the beneficial uses of Canyon Lake and Lake Elsinore, swimming, fisheries, aquatic life habitat, are not impaired. So if there are some impacts to the water bodies, if water quality objectives aren't being met, or the beneficial uses are not being met, then we are obligated to place those water bodies on the 303D list of impaired water bodies. And this is pursuant to the Clean Water Act, Section 303D. Once a water body is on the Section 303D list for impairment, we are then obligated to establish these total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, for those water bodies. And the intent is to specifically address the pollutants that are causing the beneficial uses not to be met. So in the case of Canyon Lake and Lake Elsinore, back in the early 1990s, these 2 water bodies were included on the Clean Water Act Section 303D list for impairment. Lake Elsinore was identified as being impaired for nutrients and low dissolved oxygen levels, and Canyon Lake for nutrients as well. You also will see that there are some additional impairments that have been identified for Lake Elsinore through the years. Right now, we aren't prioritizing developing those TMDLs, but we may be revisiting the need to develop TMDLs for those other pollutants. So basically, I thought I'd just kind of walk you through, you know, how a TMDL gets developed and the process. So once we have identified those water bodies that are impaired, we identify the pollutants that are causing impairment, and again, in the case of Lake Elsinore Canyon Lake, it's nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. Then we identify the maximum amount of those two pollutants that can be added to the lakes and not cause the fish kills, not cause the excessive algae blooms. It's really important to note that TMDLs do not mean zero discharge. There is some allowable amount of those two nutrients that can get into the lake and not have those bad results. And so through the process of developing a TMDL, we identify what those appropriate levels are. Once we know that, then we go through and identify all the various sources. Mark showed you the list of all the stakeholders that have been involved in the TMDL. It's primarily because most of those are actually responsible for activities that result in nutrients coming into the lake. And so we take the amount of allowable nutrients that can be added to the lakes, divvy that up amongst all the stakeholders, and then specify the required reductions for those discharges. Once the TMDL is in place, the allocations are in place, the next step is to achieve those reductions, do implementation, work with the stakeholders, and then continue to monitor, reassess to make sure that we are achieving what we want to achieve in the lake. The goal is to have a lake that has minimal amounts of algae blooms, fish kills, those kind of things, so that we can eventually take the water bodies off the 303D list. So the regional board did adopt the TMDLs in 2004. They were approved by EPA in 2005, and since that time, those TMDLs have been in the implementation phase. I'm sure you'll hear a lot this morning about what kind of activities the various stakeholders have been doing, but very basically, all of the stakeholders have been required to develop implementation plans to tell the regional board how they intend to achieve their required nutrient reductions. The schedules, the dischargers have to provide a schedule of implementation activities. At the same time, the regional board has developed appropriate permit requirements, incorporating those requirements, say, into the municipal MS4 permits or the dairy permits. And most recently, the regional board did adopt an ag waiver to incorporate some of the TMDL requirements for agricultural discharges. And I'm sure Pat's going to speak to that shortly. The final compliance date for the TMDL is December of 2020. So I realize that date is coming up fairly quickly here. And I understand that the stakeholders have been working to make proposed revisions to that TMDL, and that's something that the regional board would definitely entertain. So one of the things I just want to leave you with, I think that as far as TMDLs go, I've worked in other watersheds on other TMDLs, and I think that for the most part, I think this TMDL effort and implementation actions for this particular TMDLs is really one of the success stories. I think with the leadership of LESJWA and their ability to get all of the stakeholders together, sitting in a room and working on solutions, I think that's been a definite benefit to the watershed and to the implementation of this TMDL. And I'll leave it at that.